My name is Paul Roos. I am the chair of the Board of Commissioners of the Chittenden Solid Waste District. There is a quorum present, and I am calling to order this regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of the Chittenden Solid Waste District. The first item on the agenda is the agenda itself. I have one item to add to other business, which is that will deal with the seating of the Finance Committee members, which I held off on doing at last month's meeting. Are there any other items or changes, requests concerning the agenda?
Paul, this one, we may have a calendar reminder. Do you want to add as well?
We'll put that on there at other business as well. I'm hearing no others, but just as an introductory comment or explanatory comment, we often or occasionally do not hold a July meeting, but Sarah and I determined that the importance of the MRF project really required it. And that's really the sole topic tonight. And that's why you do not see the regular consent agenda with the regular slate of reports and updates. A lot of staff has been on vacation. We'll get those updates again next week, but just by way of explanation that that's why you're not seeing them. It was not an omission, it was intentional. We'll move on then to item number 2 on the agenda, which is a public comment period. Are there any members of the public who would like to address the Board of Commissioners, either via Zoom or on the phone? I am not seeing any, and I am not hearing any. I don't want to rush things and preclude any comments, but again, don't hearing any. So we will move on then to item number 3, which is the materials recovery facility. A couple of very important items to explore tonight. I will turn it over to Sarah and staff for presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul. And so as you mentioned, we have several items all to do with the MRF this evening. The first one is a requirement of going out to seek bonding for the project. So anytime the district has to or elects to enter into long-term indebtedness, and we do need to receive the approval of our voters, the eligible voters in Chittenden County, or within the district, in this case, Chittenden County. We also need to pass what's known as a resolution of need. So the public needs to have an assurance that there is a true public need, public interest in the project, and that it will serve the public good. So it is incumbent upon the Board of Commissioners to pass a resolution stating the various reasons why we believe that the district voters need to approve the long-term indebtedness, demonstrating the need for this project. So that is the first item that you have, and this has to be done according to a very strict schedule. So this is why it is before you today. We could have waited until August, but there's really no need to do so. And I think getting this resolution of need passed ahead of all of the early voting that will be coming up very shortly is really important. It will also support our ongoing public education efforts and outreach efforts. And we can then, as we start to talk with our select boards one-on-one about the project, this will again will have been demonstrated by the board that there is indeed a need for a new MRF in Vermont and in Chittenden County specifically. So, Thomas, I don't know if there's anything more specific that you want the board to know before we take questions or comments on the resolution.
Yes, the resolution does, as the executive director has indicated, show that there's the board has determined that there is a need for these capital improvements, and that the expense of financing this new MRF cannot be paid out of current revenues that you've got to borrow and incur indebtedness for it. And so the resolution does approve the form of the ballot question that would be presented to the voters, does approve that the location of the polling places, which will be in each member community, is scheduled for the bond vote for November 8th. of 2022, at which a general election will be held for state officials, as well as a couple of open positions at the federal level, Senate and House of Representatives. The amount of the bonds being requested for authorization is $22 million. And I will point out there is one Scrivener's error that was in here. It's in the Exhibit A of the warning. And it says the board at a special meeting held November 8th, 2022. That November 8th, 2022 in that section should be July 27, 2022, if the board so acts and adopts that resolution. And also as part of that warning, there is a footnote referencing the polling places. That footnote would be removed. So.
I'm sorry, Thomas, for clarification, the footnote regarding polling places, you said that would be removed because there was a point made that it should refer to I believe, the city of Essex now, not the town of Essex.
So that should be changed. Yes. Yep.
And I just want to be careful if technicalities not tripping us up if we approve the wording tonight. So the warning in the polling place that would be corrected. Yes, that would need to be corrected to refer to the city. And I believe also was it
the location for St. George is missing as well, so we would need to add the polling place for St. George.
Ron, your hand is up.
I think that change regarding Essex also applies to Section 2 ballot question, which currently indicates Village of Essex Junction and Essex Town.
Leslie. You're muted, Leslie.
Thanks. Sorry, this isn't directly pertinent, but it's something I think we need to talk about or have an answer to after the vote on the proposed. There will be the motion that I'm sure will be proposed, and that is that there are going to be voters who have already voted early or will have voted early by mail, absentee ballot before November 8th. And I wonder how we're going to reach those people with a special request to go to their polling place. I just want to put that out there as a marker to understand what's going to be done about that.
Yes, that is a critical component of our public outreach efforts and campaign. And it has been slightly complicated this year due to the change in law where the Secretary of State is now automatically mailing general election ballots to eligible voters throughout the state. We are not eligible for that service. So regardless, our voters are going to have to request our ballot, and our ballot is considered a special election ballot. So it's a local election, special election. So regardless, they were going to have to ask for our ballot anyway. If they do go vote in person, then they will be given all of the ballots that they need to use. But we are going to have to execute a much more intensive get out the vote effort with very specific instructions as to how to access the ballot. So yes, we are unfortunately very painfully aware that we are not eligible. And we've had multiple conversations with the Secretary of State's office. I have had conversations with Jim, and they do not see any leeway in the law, how it is written currently, to allow them to mail it out for us. So it's an additional couple of steps, but we are on top of it and aware, and are moving forward to make sure that everyone who wants a ballot receives one.
One point, if I may, just it's the city of Essex Junction. The town of Essex remains the same. The village references to the village of Essex Junction would be changed to the city of Essex Junction.
Thank you. Other commissioner comments or questions? I have one additional procedural question, which I posed to Sarah. Since we're meeting virtually, how are we to obtain the signatures of the commissioners should this resolution be approved?
Yeah, Thomas, that was a question hopefully I forwarded to you from Paul. Joe, do we need to have the physical signatures of each commissioner present tonight, or does the affirmative vote on the resolution satisfy the requirement?
The affirmative vote will satisfy as if it's by a majority vote, and the secretary of the Board of Commissioners can then just certify that it was adopted and approved at a public meeting. So it's not a requirement that it be signed.
Thank you.
Rick, your hand is up.
Rick, you're muted.
You're absolutely right. Sorry about that. I noted the need to change the date, but in addition, it's a regular meeting rather than a special meeting. So that also needs to be changed, correct?
I believe so, yes. This would be a special meeting.
It would be a special meeting?
Tonight's meeting is not a special meeting. Tonight's meeting is a regular business meeting. So is that the language you're referencing?
It referred to a special meeting taking place in November. If we're changing the date to be today, it should be a regular meeting, correct?
Yes.
What Rick is referring to is the top of Exhibit A on page 5 of the board packet. So I think we're clarity on that.
Yes, the same line that the November 8th date should be changed to July 27, 22. It should be at a regular meeting of the held July 27th, 2022.
But it reads, the legal voters of the Chittenden Solid Waste District are hereby notified and warned to meet in a special meeting on November 8th at times and polling places. Here, your name.
That stays the same.
Yeah.
Because that is a special meeting of the voters.
It's on number 1.
That's correct. It's under item number 1, description of the project. The
So
board.
the board at a regular meeting held July 27th, 2020. Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
This is important because, again, we need to act on this tonight, and I think all the commissioners need to have confidence on the specific language that they're voting on. And we also don't want to come back and have to redo this if we missed something and a technical correction is required. It's a long, it is a long resolution. Prefer that we not read the entire resolution if that's agreeable to the board, as long as we're clear on the corrections that are being made to it. That would be my direction as chair to the body.
Right. So to be clear,
Sarah, can you, if you have screen sharing, let's put it up.
Yeah, there are 2 resolutions. So let me. So, and we increase this a little bit. So the first resolution is here for the result, and then includes the wording of the ballot initiative. And then the second resolution or the continuation of the resolution is the warning that is Exhibit A. So I think we would want to Exhibit A as corrected, Thomas, or as not quite amended, but as corrected.
corrected.
would be that resolution.
Before I ask for a motion, is there other discussion on this resolution? Jen, your hand is up, and then Lee. Jen, you're muted.
Thank you. The exhibit that's the actual question that the board is to approve tonight, the approval of general obligation bonds for Chittenden Solid Waste District. We had an internal conversation that included Thomas, that it would be better for the voters if we referred in that title of that resolution to reference the materials recovery facility, which matches our efforts with the outreach and education about this initiative. So if it could read approval of general obligation bonds for Chittenden Solid Waste District dash materials recovery facility, that would be helpful for the voters to understand what this is about without having to read all the way down, so that they understand through our education and outreach what this is about.
Thank you, Jen. Lee.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, I was just reading the bottom of that paragraph. I know in discussions earlier it talked about, not burdening, voters of or member municipalities with the cost of this project, but I see it does say to the extent necessary, assessments to member municipalities in accordance with the district's charter. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? Has something changed to where we think we're going to have to go to the voters and ask for some assistance?
Yeah, no, it's we are still not at all anticipating needing any assistance in repaying the debt service, and we'll talk more about why we're confident in that. This is basically, it's covering the district from a legal standpoint, and Thomas, you can elaborate more if you like, but it's to basically not promise that we'll never have a need to charge an assessment. And really the only way that I think we would need to charge an assessment is if for some reason the district were dissolved, and then our debts needed to be satisfied, and they weren't able to be satisfied through other means such as selling assets, et cetera. But there's nothing that we see in our projections or our forecasts that would indicate a need to assess our member towns. But we do need to say that because in our charter, we say this is why we're seeking their approval is because there's a risk associated with any long-term indebtedness of the district, and because you're all members jointly of the district, you assume those joint risks. So we do need to state it so that the voters understand that there is a joint risk associated with entering into the long-term debt. But no, we are confident that we are not going to have to send any bill to our member towns for this project.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that for me.
Other questions on this resolution before we have a motion to approve? Yeah, Sarah, if you could just scroll up to the very top.
I think that, so there's a lot of whereases. So here's the now therefore be it resolved with the legalese, be it further resolved, and then a further resolved. It doesn't seem like much, and if you like, Paul, I can read it into the record.
No, actually, I just wanted to, just to the top, to ask if the commissioner was ready to move the resolution. I can read the resolution of the Board of Commissioners, the Chittenden Solid Waste District, as corrected. Ready for that? I think we're ready for that to be moved and seconded.
So moved, South Burlington.
Thank you. Do we have a second on to move the resolution?
Second, Charlotte.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the resolution as corrected per the discussion tonight. Are there any questions or discussion on the motion? I think we're ready then for the question. All those in favor of approving the resolution, please visually raise your hand so the secretary can get a count. And Amy, if you can tell us when you're okay.
Paul, are you casting a vote or are you abstaining?
No, I'm casting a vote. Thank you.
I'm all set.
Thank you. All those opposed, please physically or visually raise your hand. I think, Amy, you're probably recorded that we're not seeing any raised hands. Are there any abstentions? The motion is approved. And we're one step further in this process. The next item on the agenda is item 3EB, which begins on page 10 of the agenda, the single stream equipment procurement. I'll turn that over, I'm guessing, to Josh, but also perhaps to Sarah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Josh can take this one away. After one brief comment, that this is a culmination of a very long process. I want to thank Josh and Jen for the many hours that went into learning about the systems, visiting facilities, really diving extremely deeply into all of the possibilities and iterations of the different systems that there could be. And the district is really lucky to have, this team who is so very knowledgeable now about all the different ways that we can sort materials better for the benefit of CSWD. So I just want to publicly thank Josh and Jen for all the hours and all the hard work that you've put into this. So Josh, take it away with the details, please.
Right. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right. Let's see if I can share this thing. Share. Okay. Can everybody see what
Yes.
see that?
Yes, it is.
Are you seeing the actual presentation slide part of it?
We are. We're seeing the blue bin and the pub.
Perfect. Okay, great. Well, this is going through our equipment procurement for our MRF. There's two steps to this process of building a MRF. One is to identify the equipment and the service provider that we want. The next step will be to actually develop the site and come up with cost estimates to build the building. So step one, here we go. Our procurement objective. We've talked a lot about our existing MRF, and one of the things that jumps off the page at our existing MRF is our requirement for new technology. The technology that we were requiring is industry standard at this point, but it also kind of filters through a lot of the objectives that we had pointed out in our RFP to select an equipment provider. So we were requesting flexibility in material sorting, automation of material sorting, and that was to stop relying so heavily on human workforce, and then optimization of material sorting, and that is really to use automation to increase our recovery rates and our purity of our materials. One of the largest objectives we also had is futurizing, which according to my spell check is a word. And really that's developing room for robotics. There's significant advances in robotics right now and artificial intelligence and artificial neural networks. We are at the point where we're interested but not ready to purchase yet. So we wanted to make sure we had room. We see a lot of value in the future for robotics, but at this point, we do still see that the QA/QC portion of our recycling center will be probably human sorting. And then potential increase for higher future throughputs, room to build, room to grow, room to increase our throughput. And then finally, service parts, maintenance, and training. We are building a new technological facility, which is different than what we've been doing for the last 23 years. So we really hit all the people who responded to our RFP hard with what kind of service they can provide, how many parts are available to us at an acceptable range of distance to get it to us, how many maintenance technicians were available to us, and if they had the potential for training at one of their own facilities or on site, because we will be requesting to install optical sorters, which are new to us. The qualifications, we know we want a 25 ton per hour processing throughput. We want to keep the processing footprint to 40,000 square feet. We want optical sorters, ballistic separators, eddy current magnet separator, 2 baler systems, which I'll repeat multiple times through this presentation because it's extremely important. Large commodity bunkers, which helps us with our flexibility in baling and really optimizes our operations, and QA/QC on the residual line. So that means if something gets identified as not a material we want to go to a specific bunker, but it happened to be in the wrong place, we have a second chance to pull it and put it in the right place. Or if things through optical sorting get targeted that accidentally were stuck to something else, this gives us the chance to identify it and get it back into the system and recover it, which again goes along with our recovery rate and our purities that we're looking for. We did want to use our existing baler that we purchased in 2018. It is a 2-ram baler. We send all of our materials through it currently. And we wanted to integrate our glass cleanup system. A portion of our secondary system is in great shape and will last for quite a long time. So we want to make sure we're going to use that and optimize the equipment we have available to us now. Full baler redundancy, that's the 2 baler system. Currently, we only have 1. So when the baler stopped working, we are done until it starts working again. Baler redundancy means that we have the ability to send any material to either of the balers at any time. So it's just not fixing a certain material type to one type of baler. So that's really important for full functionality at our facility, and that's what we requested in our proposals. Our targeted commodity purities, purities and recovery. We wanted a 95% minimum recovery. That means that the equipment will pull 95% of whatever material we're identifying, and that the purity of that material, that when it goes to market, is 97% pure. The purity portion, because we're going to use humans to QA/QC, that will be part of the operating contract that we have. So there's a role for CSWD staffing in there or operator staffing, but with the technology that's at hand, this is not hard to get to, and we actually anticipate exceeding these percentages. But we're targeting paper, which there's multiple grades of paper that we'd like to target. Cardboard, aluminum, number 1 drink bottles are PET, HDPE, natural and colored, PP, which is polypropylene, that's the number 5 resins, which we're seeing a lot more of these days. And we'd like our technology to identify it more efficiently. Ferrous metals and rigid plastics. We currently don't send a lot of rigid plastics out because we don't have the room to store it. So that's another material that we will add into our mix that we'd like to market moving forward. Responses. So we sent our RFP out far and wide. We received 4 responses from pretty much global providers of MRF equipment. MachineX Technologies out of Quebec and also out of North Carolina. They are our current equipment provider. Van Dyke Recycling out of Norwalk, Connecticut. Bulk Handling Systems, BHS, out of Eugene, Oregon, and CP Group out of San Diego, California were the 4 bids that we received. The procurement results. So what we wound up doing is when we received the bids, we gave everybody an initial interview, and we sat down for 2 hours with each provider and walked, point by point through each bid to make sure we got what we wanted. We made some statements, asked some questions. From that, we identified a short list. We brought the short list back in for another 2-hour interview. And then at that point, we had an eye on what we liked. And we actually went out to Las Vegas, Sarah, myself, and Brian Mattal. And we actually met each provider in person that we were interested in to go through the equipment that they had proposed. And out in Vegas at Waste Expo, there was a large exhibition hall. So we were actually able to see some of the stuff that they were proposing in person and in action. It was demonstrative action. In that time, we also were able to get out to a couple of like MRFs that were proposed to us to make sure we really understood, that optical sorter is firing there. Where does it wind up? Where does it go? How does it get there? So we really kind of proved to ourselves the systems that we were interested in were the ones that we wanted and were going to get the job done for us. We also have a price point. We had a budgeted amount. So as we went through the evaluation process, we came down to that bottom table that you see there. VDRS is Van Dyke Recycling Systems, BHS is Bulk Handling Systems, MachineX, and CP Group. We scored them. Van Dyke Recycling Systems scored the highest. If you note there, they are not the cheapest. And I'll explain that later. But that was the process we walked through. It took about 5 months to get through to make sure that we selected the group that we think fits our needs the best. And so we're recommending Van Dyke. That's VDRS, not HS, sorry. They were not the lowest bid proposal. Bulk Handling System was. So when we compared those two systems side by side, Van Dyke was a little more robust. BHS has some exceptional technology, but Van Dyke was belt and suspenders, proven technology. They built in flexibility specifically to fiber, which is important to us because 80% of the commodities that we generate are fiber. So we have 4 bunkers and we can actually generate a mixed grade now if we want to match the requirements of the market, which is really exciting for someone like me. They also proposed 7 optical sorters where BHS proposed 4. And that's really that technology upgrade we were looking for. It allows all those initial points of flexibility that we really wanted to see. They're also located 4 hours away from us. So that was really important. You know, they can jump in a car and get to us within 4 hours. They've got 8 service technicians in New England, actually out at their Connecticut site. They have a project manager in Vermont, and they have approximately 20 million parts and pieces in inventory on site in Connecticut. They also have a regional training center, which was very ideal for us because we are stepping into the world of optical sorters. They can train us at their Norwalk facility for optical sorters and their balers. Their balers do lead the industry as far as longevity, and they're bulletproof. It is one of the better quality balers we can get. So that's really exciting as the baler is, you know, the heartbeat of the facility. So that's really why we kind of came and settled on this recommendation. All bids were amazing, but this is where staff is recommending.
Josh, that sums up your presentation at the moment.
Yep, that's where we're at.
Okay, thank you very much. Paul Stabler, you have your hand up.
I think it's a quick question. Josh, I think you said we'll be wanting to use the baler, the new baler that we have currently in the new facility. So did they have any problem? I'm assuming it's not a Van Dyke baler. So did they have any problem in installing and, you know?
No, that integration is pretty straightforward. It wasn't a MachineX baler we bought either. We put it into a MachineX facility. And a 2-ram baler is really good on containers. And the Van Dyke baler they're proposing can run the entire system by itself. And it's really good for baling fibers. So that's exciting as well, that we can mix our commodities to the baler type.
All right, thank you.
Ken, your hand is up, and then Ron, I see your hand is up. You'll come, Ron, after Ken. And you're muted, Ken.
No, I'm back.
Okay.
Josh, I understand number 1 and number 2 is more valuable than number 5, clear plastic. Is that right? Or not?
So number 2, natural, is the most valuable. So number 2 can be broken into natural and colored. The most valuable container besides aluminum is the plastic is a number 2 natural. Number 1 fluctuates and number 5 fluctuates, but we're starting to see an increase because number 5 is more environmentally friendly to generate. So a lot of industry packagers are shifting towards number 5s. And the difficulty right now is that, you know, like a clamshell, like the thing you can buy to put your salad in at Whole Foods, that can be a 1, 2, or a 5. And so when you've got people staring at it, it's hard to pull that immediately. But when you've got an optical sorter identifying its resin code, that we can pull a lot more of the actual material, which is why our purities are going to be up around that 97%.
Yeah.
And we're seeing, you know, it's also in bulk, right? So if we only have a couple tons of number 5 at a certain price, but a whole bunch more at a higher price, it's I'm getting into the weeds. What I'm trying to say is we're anticipating number 5's increasing, and the system will allow us to pull those.
That was really my question, because I've been seeing 1, 2, and 5 like McDonald's clear plastic glasses and 1, 2, and 5 clamshell type things on the street. And I was thinking, obviously sorters couldn't handle it. I mean, people couldn't handle that. So the optical sorters can actually tell the different products. That's fantastic.
And that Ryan will get into that next when he gives his presentation a little bit. But yeah, that was why we wanted to increase our technologies, because the container shapes kind of stay the same or shift a little bit, but the types change. And it's really difficult to train somebody on the fly to pick 60 containers a minute. You know, it's really difficult. So yeah, we're really excited about the system.
Thank you, Ron, and then Rick.
Yeah, Josh, I have a question about futurizing, specifically automation and robotics. And I'm assuming that computers are involved. So my question really is, have you begun discussions about how to protect the district against hacking of automation and robotics? Because if a hacker gets into the system, he could do a lot of damage financially to the district.
I'm going to default to Ryan on that one. I mean, we have our existing baler on a remote feed to Florida, so they monitor our feed for our baler. We have firewalls. We have multiple firewalls in place. But Ryan, I will let you answer that one if you're good with that.
Yeah, no problem. So the optical sorters themselves and our control panels, if not connected to the internet, there's really no way to get in and hack those. But the moment that you connect to an unsecure server, let's say just a random server that's at the building at CSWD, that could happen. However, our support team has the ability to go in and take a look at those optical sorters, take a look at those balers while you're operating to try to avoid a trip. And there's sometimes, we can save time, save you money by being able to solve the problem via the computer. We have our own servers. So it's included in the quote where we put our own server box that only VDRS can access, like only VDRS being Van Dyke Recycling. And it's not connected to anywhere else. It's our own box, it's provided, it's dropped in there at your facility. And that keeps it secure enough to keep outside people from coming in and taking a look at it. It's super important because if you have somebody going in and making changes on a baler while somebody's trying to operate the baler, that could cause major problems. So there's a lot of strict rules due to that, just safety rules, really.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Josh. Rick.
Okay. I didn't see anything in the point system that addressed whether technology was cutting edge or whether it was bleeding edge and perhaps not fully mature yet. So can you speak to the balance of trying to get really modern equipment without getting so modern that it really isn't tested?
And Sarah, do you want to jump in or do you want me to go?
Sure. Yeah, no, sure. Thank you. It's a good question. And that's one of the reasons that we're taking the wait and see approach to the robotics. There's been an incredible increase in that technology just in the past 5 years, never mind the past 10 years. But we don't want to be that test case. And more of those units are being put into systems around the country, but we wanted to still take a bit of a more conservative approach to that newest technology. All of the technology that Van Dyke has put into their proposal, it is tried and true, and it has been in place for over 15 years around the country. So it is definitely not bleeding edge. It is current modern MRF technology. So we want to give a little bit of time and space for some of that more adventurous items. So what we did was we focused in, when we're looking at the differences in the technology being proposed, was in more of the kind of the ability of the machines to learn, right? So the AI and any kind of visioning systems, and where over time the computers would be able to better quickly identify different types of packaging of different shapes and colors and things. So that was, again, as Josh had mentioned, was really where BHS shone the most. So they got the most points under quality proposal. We have put, that's where we kind of tagged the technology. So it was, they scored the highest because they are the furthest ahead of any of the respondents on that kind of high tech, basically visioning system where the computers are learning. But Machine X is not far behind. Van Dyke is not far behind. So everyone scored pretty well, but that was where we made that adjustment for the really super ultra modern components of the tech.
Thank you.
Tim, you're up, and then Alan.
Josh, I think you said that I think staffing was one of the criteria that was evaluated. What were the range of the alternatives and how did they compare with our internal assessment?
So the range of the alternatives was roughly 9 to 23. And 23 was because the system that was proposed, we had asked, we can't afford a $19 million system. What can you do? Well, they took technology out, but they added people in. The system that we went with Van Dyke is approximately 10 to 12. The recommendation is 11 to start, but you could probably get away with less once the system's up and running. Because, when you look at a national standard, a lot of the QA/QC has to do with residue, and our residue rates are pretty low. So we want to get this system up and running to see where we need to put people. And right now we're estimating 11 is kind of our landing point to make the system as optimal as we need it. And Ryan, correct, jump in if I'm wrong, but that's how I read you guys' proposal and through our discussions.
No, you're right. And the amount of sorters affects the cost greatly. So you could have an optical sorter at every single location where there's a sorter. You could have a robot, the same kind of thing. But as you continue adding technology, first of all, you've got more maintenance you got to deal with. But secondly, your cost starts to go through the roof. So back in the day, a plant, a 25 ton per hour plant in Vermont probably would have had 25 to 30 sorters. The fact that we're down to 10 to 12 is like a nice happy medium. I just saw a plant last week in Texas running 40 tons an hour with 7 sorters, which is great. That's a good direction we're moving in. But then again, that's a $30 million plant. So it's kind of give and take, and it just depends on budgeting, and you're going to make great quality, with that 11 number that Josh just mentioned.
So we had to balance that, and that's what we'd asked for in our proposal because we knew what our budget was in our mind.
Tim, you want to ask any follow-up questions, or is that addresses it for you? Good. Thanks. Alan.
Josh, you have quite a high level of purity listed in your presentation. And I guess my question is, where does that number come from? And the second part of that question is, does that also deal with the incoming product being, cleaner and more better, as we might say, contamination? Yeah, just curious where that number comes from.
So those numbers came from the ISRI specs on commodities acceptance for factories, and right now the market bears what the market will take. But ISRI, they're the group that rates what a commodity's sellable value should be. So what I did is I marked up what their true specs were for their sellable commodities, which was that 97% purity, and 95% recovery. The market doesn't require that right now, and I think Ryan will speak to this, but the market's changing. So as of 2018, when China closed their doors and we had that recycling crisis, the international market had a lot more flexibility in purity and residual content. Now that we're domestic, it's great because we don't have to put anything on a boat. There's a lot more robustness in the system, but the system was also requiring a cleaner bale of material. So that's why we targeted that 97% purity so that we could be market relevant for the next 20 years. Does that help, Alan?
I guess it isn't. So that's not guaranteed by the vendors. It's a number that you picked based on the sale of the product.
And that's what we asked our vendor. That's what we asked our proposers to provide us with a system that can get us there. And so the The 95% recovery is, we can do that with our optical sorters, and the purity level is the accuracy of those optical sorters. And then if the optical sorters pop anything off that isn't what's supposed to be there, that's where our QC line comes into play. And that's why we kept humans on the QC line, because that's an easier job. You're sifting through picks that are identifying contamination or the wrong, outthrows, the wrong material. And we've got spots to recover those. So that's why we said 97% purity. And that's why I said in the beginning of the conversation, it's still on us too. We're going to have to staff that QC line to get to that 97%.
It's a combination, Alan, of both the efficiency and effectiveness of the optical sorting and having some humans to basically quality control that equipment. So we're aiming for this very high level to really meet the top level of the scrap recycling industry's specifications. So it's that combination of the optics, and again, Ryan can speak to the sorters, their sorting technology, and so it's the number of optical sorters you have, the quality of the optical sorting, and again, Van Dyke brings a industry leading optical sorting partnership as well, and having the right people in the right spots. And when we're building in flexibility for the future, future sizing, and I think Josh should coin that word. I don't know that that's real, but that's fine. We'll take it. There are by every optical sorting station, there are additional slots for additional people. If we want to, really even further maximize, we can do that. So at each location, there's room for either robotics or another person to really maximize that efficiency.
So, Alan, so they wrote a really good RFP, and those were the targets that they wanted us to reach, which gave us a challenge. So our design is based upon trying to meet those goals as good as possible. Now, for instance, if I'm shooting PET with my optical and I'm getting 95% of it and it's coming through, but there's some contamination, and then it becomes the responsibility of that sorter to take that little bit of contamination out. If that sorter falls asleep or is looking at their phone or go for a cigarette smoke or whatever, we can't stop that. So it's the constant fluctuation of up and down. Now, let's say we achieve 95% recovery and the purity is only 93%. The market's not turning you away. They're just setting really high standards for the best quality product possible to get the best price for them. So the system's set up for that. And over years and years, and we've dealt with the national sort thing that Josh talked about in 2018. We've had to change how we build our systems, use tools in different ways to achieve those goals. And, Sarah and Josh and Jen, they went out and saw plants and saw that happening. So that's how they base their decisions on that.
Thank you.
And this system, 80% of our material is fiber, cardboard, or paper. This system fires multiple times on our paper to keep it clean, which is the bulk of what we sell. So that's really kind of the belt and suspenders I was talking about that we're really excited about.
Right.
I'm just going to recognize myself very quickly. A comment, I believe I heard you say, Josh, that we'd have the ability to accept and process rigid plastic. And just a note to the marketing staff that I think that would be an important fact to mention to the public and part of the campaign. I think that would be well received. The fact that we could handle rigid plastics. Rin.
Thanks. A couple questions related to QA, QC, so quality assurance, quality control. Is there, as part of the contract, would there be any residual or bale sorts as part of the startup for within the first 6 months or first year of the acquiring the equipment?
So we'll do testing. When the system is put in place, we'll spend, Ryan, 2 weeks of system testing with Van Dyke employees and CSWD or operators to really validate and verify. And we'll bring back to the board, or maybe I don't know. Will we bring that back to the board? Got it. I hope I'm not getting ahead of myself. Really, kind of what our recovery rates are and what our purities are. So, and Ryan, you can speak to that a little more.
Yeah.
We've done it in the past.
Yeah, basically every MRF. So, there's a ramp up period. So when we flip the switch to the plant, there's going to be trials and tribulations, and we have to calibrate the optical sorters to do the job they're supposed to do, make the paper as clean as possible, make everything as pure as possible, and get our recovery rates all the way up. So that takes a few weeks of optimization, with our team on site and training your people, what to see, what to change, what to do. Once we feel that the system's operating 100% best we can do, then we'll work as a team, work with Sarah and work with Josh and their operators, and maybe segregate 100 tons of material, run 4 hours, make sure the material can run 25 tons per hour, and then do some select bale audits, and make sure that we are achieving the recovery rates for paper, do a residue audit all over that 4-hour period. So that's something that we're going to come together and build a protocol and a testing procedure for. So that's always how we do things, especially when it comes to municipal bids and there's taxpayer dollars involved, and people are looking at this plant, wanting to make sure it operates the way it was said it was supposed to operate. So there's typically, and Sarah will deal with this later, but some kind of holdback or something that once everyone's happy, once we've achieved our goals, then we complete the project.
Okay, thanks. A couple additional questions related to QA/QC, if that's okay with Paul. There's a remote component to the optical management of the optical sorters. Did I understand that correctly?
Say that again, Brian.
So you don't have to be on site to. Oh, do you have to be on site to do QA/QC with the optical sorters?
So if there's an issue with the opticals not firing, or they're not hitting their, So Ryan, could you speak to the ability to for Van Dyke to remote in?
Sure. Yeah. So as I was talking about, we'll have a tech on site. He'll set up the optical sorters, set up the recipes, calibrate them so they know what your material type is like and the throughput's like, and then we leave. And then your operators basically turn the system on, and the optical sorters run and they operate, and they do what they're supposed to do. One day, all of a sudden, you see that half the PET is being missing, and you can't figure out why. At that point, you'll call into our team in Norwalk. They'll be able to dial in and see, just basically the screen and the control. Maybe we'll ask for some videos or something like that, and say, okay, half your valve block is broken. Then you guys say, we can't fix that valve block. Then my guy gets in the truck and he goes up and he comes and does the repair and brings the spare parts. So the only time we're really linked in online is when you call our techs in and they're able to just remote in, and all they can really see is the HMI, the screen, and look at the warnings, and there's diagnostic tools and things like that built into the optical.
Okay. So will there, as far as the audits, will there be, once you pull back, will there be the ability to either request or have our teams do accuracy data analytics on a monthly or quarterly basis?
Yeah, so we train your team to be able to read that in the machine. Okay. So if you look at the machine, you can see you've got X amount of material coming over, and PET is 70% of that material, and you can see it there. If you go to the next machine is number 2 PE, then all of a sudden you're still seeing a lot of PET on that machine. Just by what it says on the screen, you're able to tell, well, maybe there's something wrong. So you've got it's different. We're trying to get people away from picking through trash, honestly, and sorting through trash and getting more technical. So the people that are walking through the plant need to understand this type of data and be able to watch and be able to see and be able to know that there's a lot of PET getting the end of the line, look in the residue line. But yeah, the optical themselves can give you a lot of information, and that's stuff that you can print out and download to Excel and take a look at your charts and what's happening.
Okay, so it's capable of doing reports.
Yes, it is. Yeah. And then even on the baler side, if you're making, let's say, 5 bales a day of PET, and all of a sudden you're only making 2. The baler report's going to tell you you've only made 2 bales of PET. Well, why is that? That's weird. Nothing, it should stay pretty normal. So all that stuff's important things. I mean, Burlington, you get a lot of people coming in the summer by Lake Champlain. Your PET levels might spike because people are drinking bottled water, or, your glass might go up because they're drinking wine or whatever. You'll be able to chart those changes and inconsistencies as the seasons change.
Last question.
Yeah.
So in addition to the optical sorters identifying the material type, are they also able to identify contamination of the material? So food residual within the container?
Not really. It's got to have a signature that bounces back because it's near infrared. So what it'll do is it won't see it. It'll just
Okay.
drop and just go in the negatives.
And we didn't ask for that level of sorting or scanning. So it's not a knock on Van Dyke. It just wasn't asked.
Okay.
But we do have a residual line. You know, we have the final line that goes to our MSW containers, and there's the ability for us to at least observe what's on that. So, you know, we can put a QC station. We do have an optical on that to pull the materials we want to get back into the system, but we do have with this system the ability to put a person on that to identify anything that we may or may not want to be going in the garbage. And we, you know, or we could just stand there for an hour a day and identify it as well. But you know, at least we have a position to do that.
So it's the opposite.
Yeah, that wasn't the question. I think the question was, can it identify something that should normally be sorted?
Right.
You know, so say like a half, peanut butter jar that's got, still a good slug of peanut butter in there. And would it identify that as a contaminant? And the answer is no.
Right. Okay. Thank you for clarifying.
Okay, thank you.
All good questions. Other questions and comments? Yeah, Rick.
Yes, I'm thinking ahead to what I might say to a skeptical voter that challenged me on this. How do we know that the 92 to 95% purity range is a good place to be and that it's not past the point of diminishing returns?
That is, I guess it's mill acceptance, at that point.
Yeah.
Marketing
really,
question.
Yeah, right. And Brian, I mean, that's, correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, that's, as long as we're getting into the mills, and as the quality around us increases, I feel that, we'll know real quick if we're not meeting the quality standards and requirements.
I think, Richard, what a lot of voters don't understand is that the MRF, Sarah and Josh's MRF and Jen's MRF is a macro sort. So you're making a bale of PET. It's not 100% PET, but it's 95% PET. And let's say there's 5% that's not. That gets bought by another MRF, basically, that then cleans up that 5% and grinds everything down and makes almost a perfect product to return into pellets. So the job of this MRF in Williston, I think, isn't really to do that, and then some people try to push it too far, and then all of a sudden you're sending perfect bales, but yet you've got more residue, and that PET mill is still cleaning up your bale, and they're not giving you any more money for it. So it gets interesting, and I don't think most of the voters realize that there's more steps to cleaning that up. You've got a PET bottle with a PE cap on it all over the place, all the Poland Spring bottles. What happens with that PET cap? They grind it all down, and then there's a special machine that shoots the PE out to clean it up. So it can't be perfect, but we try to get to as close as we can, put it that way.
So, Rick, are you concerned that some of your constituents might think that we could have should have spent less? Is that the concern, that we're trying to get too high of a quality and we're just not, it's not worth it? Or I guess
that's exactly what I'd like to be able to address. Okay. Because if you take that Ryan's argument further, you could say, well, let's just do 85% purity, since the next level is going to take out those contaminants anyway.
So I think the response to that is that the equipment, all of the sorters, have that between that level of 90 to 96 or 97% accuracy. So it doesn't do anyone any good to shoot for less than what the machines are designed to do. So we want to continue to make sure that we're maximizing the technology available to us, which is, again, not super, high futuristic technology. This is modern, in place right now. this is what the industry is expecting and requiring. So we need to get to a point where we are able to consistently meet the needs of the markets that we have access to. And we want to continue to be able to access even more markets than we're currently involved in, to give ourselves as much flexibility to move these materials for as long as possible into the future. So it really doesn't benefit us at all to sort to anything less than what is currently accepted and then shoot for even better than that.
So is it safe to say then that the 92 to 95% purity range, or even 97%, is essentially industry standard, and that's what the mills are expecting to see, and there's going to be consequences in the market if you don't hit that level?
Absolutely. I think that is 100% accurate. And the concerns are that for facilities that are not able to meet that bare minimum requirement, you get quickly shut out of those markets. And once you're out of the primary market and into the secondary market range, it is a bear to claw your way back into the primary. We don't want to slip out of that. We want to solidify and secure our place in the primary market.
Great. That's very useful information. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Ryan does have a PowerPoint that he has prepared to kind of showcases some of the equipment. So do we want to have Ryan kind of walk through the system?
Yeah, I think that's important. We're potentially spending, upwards of $16 million, if I recall the numbers here. So I think it behooves us to see what we would be getting.
Yeah, so I would recommend, Ryan, if you could kind of go through your presentation, and then Paul, let's read the resolution after. There may be additional questions on particular parts of the flow or whatever it might be.
Okay, great.
Do you need screen sharing, Ryan?
I think I can do it. Let's see here. Do you guys see my screen?
Yep. Great.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, everyone can see my screen?
Yes, thank you.
All right, great. So yeah, I talked already quite a bit about the selection process and the RFP that came out from Josh and Sarah's team. And they wrote a really good RFP. And what's happening these days is there's a lot of antiquated MRFs that were built, let's say, late, like 2008 and through 2012. And technology has changed a lot since then. So the requirements of the end markets, which we were discussing a little bit earlier. So we've been in this market space since 1984, started with balers and brought balers over from Holland. Super high level balers. We brought it to New York City that were baling like 50 tons an hour of cardboard in New York City, and expanded from there. So it went from cardboard and primarily high grade papers and newspapers, and then went out into plastics as well. So we're based in Norwalk, Connecticut. We've got over 1,700 projects with about 275 single stream MRFs, and a lot of new MRFs actually being built currently. Over 600 balers installed, 700 optical sorters installed. So as Sarah was saying, optical sorting has come a long way since the first ones that we installed back in around 2005. So we're expanding the utility of those machines, so not just in plastics but in fiber as well. We've got 14 mega MRFs of 50 plus tons per hour. So these large scale MRFs are almost double of what we proposed for Chittenden. So in New York City, we're processing about 1,000 tons per day of containers there. We built the state of Rhode Island single stream system that's currently running in Johnston. Washington, DC, big facility there as well, kind of spread out all across America. And then one in Connecticut, Berlin, Connecticut, that anyone's welcome to come visit. That's starting up in just a couple of weeks now. So it's a 50 ton per hour system that has taken the material from Mira and different parts of Connecticut and kind of all culminating there in central Connecticut. So they talked a little bit about service and support. So in Norwalk, we've got a very large distribution center for our spare parts, about $19 million in inventory that can either be shipped overnight to you, shipped just regular UPS. We have couriers that can bring it up to you, or if somebody gets in their van and drives down to Connecticut, they're able to pick it up there. We have a lot of customers in the area that do that now. We have 32 US based technicians, 8 to 10 of those residing here in New England. And 98% of our problems are resolved actually over the phone or via the internet, as we were discussing earlier. We've got phone support available 24/7, 365. One of the big benefits that we have as well is Van Dyke Direct. So Van Dyke Direct is basically the Amazon style ordering system. So when you buy a system, your whole system and parts inventory goes into a website. We have pictures of every single part. We've got over, I think it's 13,000 parts, so almost 40,000 pictures of each individual item. So your technician can put in a serial number and see that it's the right part, and then get it shipped. And then also keep track of your inventory, what's missing, what you need more. If you use, a conveyor belt shot, you can pre-order one to replace it, that type of thing. Another thing that's included in the system is Van Dyke Vision. It's an augmented reality system. So it's this little hard hat you see over to the right, and you've got a technician looking into the panel. So what that is basically is our technician can see what your technician is seeing. And he can actually, there's a little screen that you can see on that hard hat here, where our guy can circle or just mark up different things to say, hey, that relay's got a problem. Can you change that wire? Can you do that? So it's almost like having feet on the ground, but your technician's kind of driving the show and our guy's telling them what to do. So that's new technology that's included with this as well. We've got a used equipment rebuild shop, rebuild balers, and then there in Norwalk, we've got Van Dyke University. So that's training schools for our optical sorters and for our balers. Just a map of our service locations. Pretty heavily concentrated there in the Northeast, and then we've got our West Coast team as well. Here's a couple of pictures of the warehouse in Norwalk. Again, anyone's welcome to come visit. So I've done a couple of presentations lately about what's happening to the industry, and myself and my competitors right now, we've never been more busy in our lives, and a lot of this stems from the 2018, the national sword that we're trying to stop taking paper materials. We had severe issues getting materials marketed or sent internationally. The plastics people were striking back that the quality standards were bad, and that's why like today, like I said, any MRF that was built before 2013 or so, or 2014 even, is getting completely either a full rebuild or major retrofits, and it's been honestly very difficult for us to keep up. So the standards of quality are increasing. There's a lot more domestic markets that aren't going to take the contamination rates that we had with previous sorting technologies. Recyclability has become a big issue as well, where producers are starting to realize, I think Josh mentioned it earlier, that polystyrene number 6 is not, there's no end market for it. It's not really recyclable, but the number 5 is. So people are starting to be more cognizant about that, realizing black plastics are difficult to recover and recycle. They're moving away from those things. So the market itself has worked on that. A lot of states are pushing different diversion rates. So really, high levels, high expectations of the future, 20-year plans to make sure you're diverting 70% of your material from landfill, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's a lot of improvements in reporting and data. The waste industry generally has been pretty far behind in that. If you look at wastewater and water treatment, they've always been ahead. We're trying to catch up with that and using data to make decisions, or before we didn't really have the data, it was just kind of by eye. And then the lastly is improving working conditions. So, since COVID's another big factor for all this business that's being generated, is that they're having a hard time finding people. We're recognizing that working in a trash, a lot of these picking through trash at -10 degrees, in the middle of February isn't a pleasant job, and it's not where we want to put our workforce. So we're trying to find ways to help those people and improve those work conditions and change the positions that those sorters have today. So some of the advancements, in single stream screening technologies have changed. I believe you have a screen currently that wraps after 6 hours of running. It hardly works as a screen anymore. It works as a conveyor. Contamination rates are through the roof after a shift. Then you have to send somebody in with a knife to try to cut all the wrapping and all that stuff out. It's just not safe, and it doesn't work well. So now we've got non-wrapping screens. Optical sorting has gone from just plastics to cleaning up fiber automatically and positive sorting. So we're targeting paper directly. and that's integrated into this MRF. I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of antiquated MRFs out there that are just being completely rebuilt and rethought. And there's a lot of major investments going on. So Connecticut, Murphy Road, building MRFs in Chicago, Houston, Denver, all new with all this new automation and new technology. So getting to CSWD, this is the footprint that we were given to work with, and this is your site. And part of our task was to put a MRF onto this site, try to avoid some wetlands, and we're tasked to work on some traffic flow patterns and bringing material in. So you can see down at the bottom, you've got that little purple square. That's where trucks would come in to drop for tipping. And then on the other end of the MRF is where the material all ends up, where your bale storage is. So that's the way we try to design everything, is basically on one side, you've got material that comes in, it gets processed and goes to the other end of the MRF where you have your shipping. So it's two different parts, and it helps with traffic flows. You see a little bit better on this picture. So they've asked for a very adequately sized tipping floors, 12,500 square feet. Material gets loaded there, dropped into a drum feeder with a pre-sort where they would pick mixed rigid plastics, and then a number of different opticals and screen combinations to produce the fiber quality that they were looking for. We've also got glass that comes out at the beginning of the system to avoid wear and problems downstream and contaminating other material. So in this area, we've got a large glass cleanup system that's going to meet the directives that they gave us for, Josh, it was for the DOT, I believe.
Yep, that's correct. Yeah, and R&V-Trans, but yeah, that's the requirements for PGA.
Okay. And then down here, we've got our container sorting line. So we've got optical sorters for number ones, number twos, number 5, and then a recovery optical to recover anything that might have been missed. Optical sorters, typically recovery percentages are anywhere from like 90 to 92%. So this last optical gives a chance to recirculate those missed commodities. So we maximize recovery and meet that 95% that Josh had talked about before. On the fiber side, we're making 4 different types of fiber, actually. So we're making an OCC, which is your large cardboard. So there's an entire bunker dedicated to that. We're making one bunker dedicated to O&P. So it's going to be straight paper, an optical sorter shoots cardboard out of it, and the plastics out of it. Then we've got another bunker that's going to be called a hard pack, hard mix, which is new to the market. So it's basically a 50-50 mix of cardboard and paper that is demanded by places like Pratt and certain mills. And then we'll have another bunker with small paper, kind of lower quality. We'll call it a mix that hopefully will be clean enough to blend with the O&P or potentially with the hard pack. Markets since 2018 have fluctuated and changed, and that's why we're redesigning or rethinking how we're dealing with fiber. It used to be 2 bunkers. You had OCC and you just had an O&P bunker, and that was no problem. You're able to move the paper, send it to China or wherever you had to go with it. Now the market demands are much more stringent. So by having these 4 different bunkers, you've got the ability to blend and mix depending on what the mills tell us they want. So that versatility is huge, and that was something that we built into this, and we're building into all of our MRFs now. So you can see on the left-hand side, there's bale storage. You've got the single ram baler that's got the turntable there that's bringing bales out, and then the red baler down to the south, that's the 2 ram. So for Van Dyke, there was a question earlier about us integrating a 2 ram that's not ours. Basically, every MRF that we build, we put a 2 ram in that the customer either buys or has, or we buy and integrate it into our system, because the 2 ram is really, really solid on containers, and we don't make a 2 ram. So that's the other reason. So we partner with our competitors, I guess. But yeah, that's very standard for us and typical. Another key point Josh mentioned a few times, I'm going to mention down below, is that every commodity in the plant can be baled by either baler. So if the 2 ram is broken, the single ram can take all the material via reversing belts that you can kind of see here in the middle. There's a couple belts there that can go either way. If the single ram's down, then the belts can reverse, and the 2 ram can bale all the paper and plastics. So there'll never be a time, unless some miracle happens, that both balers go down. But for most cases, that shouldn't happen, and you should be able to operate at least at some capacity. Maybe not 25 tons per hour, but whatever, just to keep material running through the facility. So some of the highlights, into a little bit more detail, there's 7 optical sorters that we proposed. 3 of them are dedicated to making clean fiber. 3 are for clean container separation, so PET, PE, and PP. And then the final recover optical to ensure, recovery and that we meet those goals that were asked of us. The single ram baler is included, and that's HPC 120. That could potentially bail everything in the plant, but we always want full baler redundancy because, like Josh said earlier, it's the heart of the system. Without a baler, you can't really do anything. So it's important. The glass cleanup system is state of the art. We're integrating some of your components because you're already making material for the DOT. We actually added some of our own components so that your components work better. So we built kind of a hybrid system together that I think is going to work out wonderfully. And then your tipping floor and bale storage are more than adequate. And no one's ever said their tipping floor was too big, but this should be really good and be able to handle the material that you guys have. So system automation on the O&P or we've got a newspaper screen. There is automated quality control to remove browns and containers via a large optical sorter, which was pretty much going to alleviate the need for any manual sorters on the paper. You've got a mixed paper that's sorted positively by an optical sorter for all remaining fiber. And when we target something positive, it makes the purity super high as opposed to negatively trying to sort. And that's something that we've learned through building of different MRFs. We talked about the automated baling, we talked about the recovery optical. There's a tool we haven't spoken about. It's called an elliptical or ballistic separator, which is a 2D, 3D separator. And the function of that machine is before the container line, there's a lot of plastic film, textiles, paper that we may have missed that contaminate your container opticals. So it makes it harder for the plastics opticals to do their job. And to meet that 97% recovery, we needed a polishing tool up ahead to make sure that those opticals can meet those purities that were required. But we also recognized that this 2D, 3D separator, in the 2D fraction, there's going to be paper. So we added an optical sorter on that 2D fraction for maximum recovery of paper and making its own grade of paper. So I know it's kind of confusing, maybe a little too technical, but these tools are built in. It's all we've thought about this, trying to achieve the goals that Josh mentioned earlier. So versatility, all the optical sorters that are going into this plant can sort by material and color. So we talked a little bit before about NAR. There's also the ability to sort by color, just for future possibilities. You never know. There could be a time where you don't want to shoot natural HDPE, or you want to focus on a certain color of material. You can do that with that. The balers are capable of all materials again. A big one is that third line. All sorters have access to material return for trash or for other products. So there's conveyor belts that run through the entire system so that sorters don't have to be dragging around buckets. I'm sure you've seen it before, where there's a sorter, he's got a bucket and it's overloaded with recyclables or it's overloaded with trash. There's going to be none of that in this plant. They're going to have a chute, they're going to drop the trash on the chute, and the trash is going to the trash directly to the compactor. Or if there's a container that's in the wrong place, you've got a PE bottle that was shot out with PET, they're able to take that PE bottle and drop it down the chute for recovery. It's going to bring it back to the beginning of the system so it goes to the right place. One other portion, you're probably going to receive some commercial material from different commercial accounts or different places. You've got the ability to direct bale cardboard, for instance. So there's a space where you can drop material and push that cardboard in, and it goes directly to a baler. Well, some of the key benefits, extremely low sorter count. Like I said, we used to have a 1-to-1 rule where if you're running 25 tons per hour and you had 25 sorters, you were doing well. That was a goal we tried to achieve, but not any longer. For all those reasons I discussed before, we're trying to keep the sorter counts at around 10 to 12 in any plant, and less is better. And we're able to do that with the addition of automation and more tools. Plants are selling for a lot more these days, but the long-term value of cutting sorters back by 15 sorters, if you look at it, it's there. And the machines show up every day. We're having issues with sorters showing up every day and trying to keep that quality going. So we've got the less wrapping screens I discussed, get the best optical sorting machines on the market. And then these SCADA and data analysis tools are they're still kind of in production and being built. So we've got, like, on the right-hand side, you can see a little like bale count per hour. These tools are all built in, they're all set, and they're ready to go, but we're expanding, and you're tied into that continual expansion. Like, we want to be able to say, it's kind of the things we were talking about before. There's something wrong with that PET optical. Why? Have it tell you, get a warning, that type of thing. That's all being built now. And probably by the time that this plant gets installed, those capabilities will be, much further along than they are today. So there you go. Sorry, it's a little bit fast. I mean, there's a lot of information, a lot of details, and I could go through the whole plant, but I know you guys are on a certain time limit.
Thank you, Ryan, for the presentation. I think it was just the right amount of time and the detail for this board. At this point, unless commissioners have a question, I think we're ready for to move the have a motion. Tim, you have a question.
Yeah, quick question, Ryan. You talked about direct baling. You mentioned it in reference to cardboard. How many will all commodities be able to be direct baled?
Yeah, so basically, if a truck comes in, there's a space on the floor inside the building where they can drop that material, and then you've got access to the baler feed line. So a Bobcat will push that material in. So cardboard is an example, but it could be anything. Could be clean containers, could be high-grade office paper that you don't want to run through the system. It can just bale because it's already sorted and good enough for baling.
Thank you.
Okay, at this point, I think we're ready to at least move the resolution, which appears on page 11 of the board packet. If that could be read into the record, have it moved and seconded, and then we have yet another opportunity for any discussion or questions.
Sure. Excuse me. Be it resolved that the Board of Commissioners authorizes the Executive Director to enter into contractual agreement with Van Dyke Recycling Solutions, Norwalk, Connecticut, for the purchase of a materials recovery facility single stream recycling system as described in their initial and subsequent response to RFP number 2022-0104 for an amount not to exceed $16,160,000, purchase of which is contingent upon a successful bond vote in November 2022.
Thank you. Do we have a motion? Does anybody care to move that?
So move, Charlotte.
Thank you. Thank you, South Burlington. It's been moved and seconded to authorize the Executive Director to enter an agreement with Van Dyke Recycling Solutions. Any discussion on the motion? We've certainly had an opportunity to go through this in detail, but don't want to shut off the opportunity to ask further questions or make any observations. Paul, you're raising your hand. Paul Stabler?
Yeah, real quick question. I'm sorry, I should know this, but we're approving this now, but of course, we won't know if we have the money until November. So there's a contingency for that, a clause for that?
Yep. So that is the final sentence in that resolution is contingent upon successful bond vote, November 2022.
Right.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I'm seeing none. I'm hearing none. I think then we're ready for the question. And again, this is an important vote. So I'd ask you to raise your hands when at the appropriate time, and so that Amy can then tell us that she's recorded all the votes correctly and accurately. All those in favor of the motion to approve this purchase of the recycling equipment contingent upon the successful bond vote in November, please raise your hand and keep it high until Amy says she's got the count.
All set.
Thank you. If you are opposed, please raise your hand. I am seeing none. Are there any abstentions? The motion is approved. Thank you very much for all the hard work. Thank you, Ryan, for all the work in making your presentation. And obviously, if this is successful, there'll be a lot more work to come. But we do look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
We are now ready for the next item on the agenda, which is it's item 3EC, the discussion on financing. Not ready for, there is no action required, but information that's vitally important to share with the board. And I will turn this over again to Sarah to begin this presentation.
Thank you. And yes, we wanted to make sure to bring back to the board an understanding of the different assumptions that went into how we looked at the cash flow and just an update on the financing options. And there are two discussions. One is for public session and one is for executive session. So I'll go through some of the public session items and may defer some conversation to the executive session as it pertains to contract negotiations that are ongoing. Some of the basic, really the basic place where we started was to do an analysis of what would be the worst case scenario or a worst case scenario. And right now we're processing, this year we processed about 46,000 tons through the MRF. During stay-at-home COVID time, we processed upwards of 49,000 tons. So that is, kind of the high weather mark without doing any really additional, sourcing of more material. So a worst case scenario would be if we were not able to access the current contractually obligated out of district tons from Casella. And per the current contract, they are required to bring into the Williston MRF 13,000 tons of recyclables from out of district sources, so out of Chittenden County. If for some reason we are unable to come to a mutually agreed upon conclusion where they would continue to provide those tons, we needed to look at the numbers from what we believe is a strong source of material from within Chittenden County. So between 35,000 tons, we feel comfortable that's what is generated within CSWD, within the district. So that's where we started or based that analysis on. And we prepared a 10-year analysis, but it's really a 13-year look because we start with what we're calling a negative year 3, negative 2, negative 1, and that are the 3 years of construction. So we started there because the financing would kick in, obviously, with the construction and the purchase of the equipment. So we wanted to include those first 3 years in the look and then go out 10 years from that. So it's 10 years from when we flip the switch and commission the new MRF, but it really is a 13-year look. So I say that because it's really crystal ball when you get out that far. But again, we're looking at some of the basic assumptions, and many of them we think will hold true down the line. So when we're looking at, again, that 35,000 tons worst case based on in-district material. We're also, again, just for the sake of consistency, maintaining the same tip fee all the way through with some exceptions, which I'll get to in a moment. And the ACR all the way through is the same. There's just not, I'm sorry, that's not accurate. The tip fee all the way through is accurate. We've done a very moderate increase on the ACR going through because as the new equipment is in place and is running, the quality will improve. So we are looking towards improved quality as we go down, starting really in year 1, probably in year 2, going out further. It does slow over time, so it's not going to be kind of that consistent every single year through year 30. We're going to have increase in quality, pricing for the quality, but the quality jump will be very significant from, again, that negative year 1 or 0 year, and then going into the first 5 years for sure. We are anticipating, and I want to, put that out there and then let the board know that we're anticipating an increase in our residue rate. And that is because the system will more accurately sort the proper materials into the proper bales. Right now, we do get some migration of material that is making its way into the wrong bale. That will not be the case when we go forward into the new system. So there will be some most likely additional material, such as Ryan mentioned, films, styrofoam, things of that nature that might be escaping into the bills now, that will not be escaping into the bills. They will be caught in our residue system. So we're planning for some increase in that residue. And I'm prepping you all for that. That is to be expected, and it will not be a surprise for us. But we do expect, excuse me, to Alan's point earlier, that we will not have the kind of the standard single stream, very high residue rate, because our recyclers here in Vermont do a really good job. So we're already starting from an excellent place. And then as we get closer to commissioning, again, we're ramping up that education. Hey, we've got a new facility, a new system. Here's what it can do. Here's what we don't want it to do. We want to make sure that we're not inadvertently harming the system. Please keep these things out. Please don't put your bowling balls in your recycling bin. Please keep out those things that wrap. So that will be also part of the ramp up to the new facility, is that additional education about what can go in and how to prepare it to, again, reduce that contamination of the materials. So another item that we looked at was the costs for processed glass aggregate to decrease over time. And this is important because this is a fairly significant cost center for us right now. The main reason being that the majority, or at least half of our facility, the portion of the process is the glass, is outdoors. So this new system brings all of the glass processing indoors. We'll be able to consistently make that PGA quality, or even up to the sandbar quality, which is the goal, year round. So as we're able to do that, then the cost to transport, to clean, et cetera, will steadily go down. And that will be an immediate effect, really kicking in quite heavily in year 2, and then again going down years, in the out years 3 to 10. So you'll see that in the spreadsheet I provided for executive session. But that is that's a big win for us, and that is immediate. As soon as it's undercover, that switches over to a much higher quality, more consistent quality all year round. So we also have kind of projected out. We've worked with the bond bank over the past year or so to provide us with different schedules based on different scenarios that we have presented to them. And the initial spreadsheet that you have in your packet was, as I mentioned in the document, for $16 million through the bond bank, with an additional zero interest loan from closed loop partners to make up that other $6 million for the total not to exceed to long-term borrow 22. So in meeting with Paul and Leslie this week, Leslie had a good suggestion of running another scenario with the bond bank to say, well, can we do kind of interest-free tax holiday of 5 years, just paying the interest and not the principal, and then to kind of preserve some cash in the first initial 5 years, and then backload the rest of it. And I did ask for that new schedule from the bond bank. I did not receive it in time I just haven't received it at all yet. So he's probably working on it. So I don't have those specific answers, but we did run a similar scenario based on previous schedules that were sent to us by the bond bank. So essentially the question was, can we preserve some cash on hand instead of, basically paying the principal for the closed loop fund, because there's only principal, and then interest from the bond bank at the same time. Can we really save some of that cash, and what would that look like? And the initial look is that it does cost us more over the course of the 25 years repayment to do the interest only for 5 years with the bond bank and 22 million. So, it does benefit us to take advantage of the closed loop zero interest loan, and then to have that principal from the bond bank be lower over time. But we can talk a little bit more about that detail, and I will formally run that once we get that information from Michael at the bond bank, which I expect he'll get that to us this week. It just didn't arrive today. And again, so we are also anticipating needing to establish a sinking fund. So the sinking fund would be basically kind of like a bank, an internal bank, where we would seed that with some excess capital, or not excess capital, excess revenue that we realized from the MRF this past year, to make sure that we do not run in the red on those operating and debt payments. So it is anticipated that due to the most likely what the contract will be for the existing MRF with Casella, as you know, again, we're continuing to negotiate that, but we have a sense for what those costs will be. Those costs combined with the debt service payment will put us in the red for the first few years. So we would tap into, draw down on that sinking fund for the first several years, 3 to 4, no more than 4 years. And then at that point, the idea of the sinking fund would be to match the sinking fund to the next year's principal and debt payment. So each year the sinking fund goes down a little bit, but it will match that next year's obligation. So we're always covering the next year's obligation. That kind of gets at Commissioner Perry's question about, you know, is there any sense or an intention of you know, having to send a bill to our member communities? And that's how we would guard against that, would be to always be forecasting and budgeting and having in that sinking fund the amount that we would need for next year. And as we pay the next year, the obligation goes down a little bit more, and it will shrink over time as we pay down the obligation. So the goal of the sinking fund is to shrink. If there's additional money in that sinking fund that is not needed to pay that next subsequent year's repayment, that excess can move into capital. So there'll always be that flow of excess into capital for future needs down the road. So those are kind of the high points that I would want to review for how we're looking at the cash flow in public session. And again, we can get into a few more additional details pertinent to contract negotiations in executive session. Are there questions about the assumptions before I touch on a little bit more on the financing? I've already kind of talked a little bit about it. But. Okay, I will go on to actually let me share this part of the screen because it's less messy or less involved, I should say. So this bit is where we are still at for the financing. And you know, again, we're looking to a combination of sources of the funds, bond bank, closed loop fund. Obviously, that we would need to be prepared to have a certain amount of contribution recycling partnership grant, and there's that asterisk next to CSWD contribution because there is an opportunity to seek funding from the EPA through the federal infrastructure grant. And that is available for solid waste and recycling infrastructure. They have not released their RFP process, their grant application process yet, so we do not know what those parameters will look like. That should come out in September, so it just wasn't in time for this discussion. We will certainly apply for a grant to those funds, to that infrastructure fund. This first year is different than the next 4 years following. So the grant is a 5-year opportunity. The first year, they are required to dedicate 40% of the funds available to environmental justice projects related to recycling and to underserved communities, particularly in urban areas. So it does reduce the potential amount that would be available for programs outside of that condition. However, that is at this point only in year 1. So there would be more funds available in year 2. So if we are not successful in year 1, we would apply again in year 2. But in the near term, we do want to make sure that in the capital reserve, we do have about $3.5 million available should we need to access cash on hand. Then we'll stop sharing here and ask if there are questions about that. I'm not seeing any hands, Paul.
I'm not seeing any questions either at this point, Sarah. Does that mean we're ready to move on to the executive session portion of this presentation?
And
Okay.
yes.
I could just point out that why we're doing this in two ways. We certainly have an obligation to inform the public of what we're trying to do. But as Sarah's pointed out, there's still some sensitive aspects of this that do need to be discussed in executive session. But that's really the reason for this two-part presentation. I think then we're ready. I'm always cognizant of the clock at 7:40. I think we're ready then to move into executive session. Is there a language that can be read?
Sure. I move that the Board of Commissioners of the Chittenden Solid Waste District go into executive session to discuss contract negotiations with respect to the materials recovery facility, where premature general public knowledge would clearly place the district, its member municipalities, and other public bodies or persons involved at a substantial disadvantage, and to permit authorized staff and the solid waste district attorneys to be present for this session.
So moved. Jericho.
Thank you. And a second?
Charlotte.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Leslie. All those in favor of entering executive session, please say aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Say nay. I don't believe any abstentions. We'll move into executive session via the link that Sarah sent out, I believe, several days ago. I believe our quorum still exists. We're ready to entertain a motion to leave executive session.
So moved, Essex.
Thank you, Alan.
Second, Burlington.
Thank you, Paul. All those in favor of exiting executive session, please say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Abstentions? We're now back in public session. We're now ready to move on to the final items on our agenda, which is 5 other business. There are 2 items that were identified. The first, I just wanted to make known to the board and to the public that I will be appointing, or am appointing, Paul Stabler of South Burlington and Rick McCraw of Heinsberg to the Finance Committee. I appreciate both of those commissioners to step up and participate in this very important and critical aspect of board governance. And I think we have a very strong team going forward with Leslie continuing as chair and as treasurer. So thank you again to all 3 of you for agreeing to serve. And then Sarah, you want to just update us on calendar for August, I believe.
Yeah, I just want to make note, and it was included on the annual organizational calendar, the meeting calendar when we published it back in June, but that the executive board will meet on the 8th of August. So we'll not be meeting on the 15th, just making sure that everyone is aware of that change in the calendar. Same time, just different day.
And the regular board meeting, I don't know, I can't remember, 24th, I believe, but whatever the
Yes.
fourth
August
Wednesday.
24th. August 24th. Mm-hmm.
And as always, all meetings, exec board, regular board, and finance committee meetings are all open to all board members and encouraged to participate. I think we have run out of business to talk about tonight, so entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved, South Burlington.
Thank you.
Second, Burlington.
Thank you. I think we got Burlington in this time.
Beat you.
All those in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. We are adjourned. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, John.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Thanks, everybody.